Yes, I'm touched by this show of emotion. Should I be fractured by your lack of devotion? Should I? Should I? Oh, you better be good to me.
And so then I had another conversation with an actor who's having a really interesting, challenging time with her agent. And I asked her, well, what's the big deal if you just left? Because it's obviously not working. It's kind of like a toxic relationship. The agent is not supportive, says things that undermines her confidence. Of course, for being a woman, there are other challenges because there's a standard of beauty that, well, men as well, but for women that they have to adhere to that puts so much pressure on them that if you're not a size 1 and a walking stick, that there's something completely flawed and uncastable about you. And so you're definitely then going to be in your head going into a casting. And then if you're just human, which you all are, and it means that every now and then you may not do well in casting, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're not going to win an Academy Award later in life. It doesn't mean anything. It's actually meaningless if we can learn to take a more Buddhist mind to all things, which is there is no meaning to any of it except what you add on to it. There is no meaning except for what you choose to ascribe to an event. So if you have to ascribe meaning to an event, can you not try to ascribe something that's more hopeful and more supports who you are? So the interesting thing is, this person's confidence is kind of cracked. And so I said to her, well, what's the big deal? Why would it be so scary to leave? And she's like, I'm paraphrasing, I don't remember exactly what she said. She's like, oh, I don't know. Ah, God, I don't think I can do that. She didn't sound like that, but like that's kind of like, she was really, the idea terrified her. And I said, okay, well, I think this is something here, because I think at one level, if you're already thinking it and feeling it, so is the other person. And or they may not be thinking it and feeling it at quite the same level, but they're actually not showing up in your life in the way you want them to show up. So from an agent perspective, let's say they're not maybe setting you out, or they're shelving you, or they don't really believe in you, so they're not working as hard for you as they are for other clients. See what I'm saying? So I really think you have two options. You either always communicate. You'll have to always first with communication. And that's also part of what I wanted to talk about is you win back your power. You guys, I think there's nothing worse than being an actor, in LA especially, although, I was just in London, wherever I teach, it's all the same. How do I help people understand that you have the power and to win your power back? It's so important, because I think there's nothing more depressing than feeling like you have no power in a business in which you want to create. And you do, by communicating your needs, by creating boundaries, by knowing when something is being said to you that isn't okay, by telling the truth. By maintaining your own standard of integrity that you expect other people to follow. That's just 4 or 5. So I asked this person, well, what would be the worst thing that could happen? And I don't think she said anything, so I'm going to just do an example of this. So who shall I use? How about Rachel? I'm going to use you. So Rachel, I like doing this. So it's like the catastrophize exercise. So if you left your agent, what's the worst thing, we're going to work backwards, what's the worst thing that could happen?
I'm agentless.
You're agentless. And if you were agentless, what's the worst thing that could happen?
I don't go out on auditions.
And if you don't go out on auditions, what's the worst thing that can happen?
I don't book jobs.
And if you don't book jobs, what's the worst thing that can happen?
I am broke.
And if you're broke, what's the worst thing that can happen?
I would have to move back to Kentucky.
Ooh, that's so good. And if you had, this is great. And if you had to move back to Kentucky, what's the worst thing that can happen?
I would be really depressed.
And if you were really depressed living in Kentucky, what's the worst thing? No offense to Kentuckians, but you know what I mean. I get it. What's the worst thing that could happen?
That's the worst.
No, keep going. We're playing the catastrophizing game. So what's the worst thing that could happen?
I would feel unfulfilled.
Okay, I don't know if that's the worst. Let's keep working. Keep going to, brain drain train. Worst thing that could happen. So you're unfulfilled. What's the worst thing that could happen if you're unfulfilled, depressed in Kentucky?
I don't know, I'm just not happy.
Stay in the specifics. You're working at the Penny Saver. I'm not making fun of people who work there. I'm just saying for you that might be difficult. So what's the worst thing that can happen if you're working at the Penny Saver? Is there a thing called the Penny Saver? What am I thinking of? The A&P.
I don't know really what that is. But
Well, you're working at a supermarket.
Okay.
So what's the worst thing that could happen if you're working in a supermarket?
Slightly embarrassing.
Okay, and what's the worst thing that could happen if you were slightly embarrassed working in the supermarket in Kentucky?
I don't know. This is just...
No, stay with me. Stay with me. You're going to get the insight. Come on, quickly.
I don't know, Tim.
Yes, what's the worst? The worst. What would be the worst?
I don't know what you're getting to here.
What do you feel like would be the worst if you woke up and you had to go work at the A&P in Kentucky? It's the worst.
It is the worst.
So it gets no worse than that. Is that it?
Yeah.
Is that the worst?
Yeah.
Because when I've done this exercise with other people, they have really interesting scenarios. Like they're selling oranges on the street corner. They are living in a shoebox on, under a bridge.
Well, I'd be living with my parents.
You'd be living with your parents. Okay, that's pretty much, yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so here's the thing. The reason why I do this is also to look at, that's actually, even though we laugh at it, that's what our minds do to paralyze the part of us that knows we have to take action. So none of those things are going to happen. And even if they did happen, let's just say in a weird parallel universe they did happen, you would ultimately discover the skills that you need to cope with those things if you were being dealt with them. You would. We all are given the resources that we need. So from that idea of I would be back at home living with my parents, working at the A&P, comes out of just doing this one thing, if it's right for the actor, of I got to have a conversation with my agent because I have to leave them. See what I'm saying? So then what happens is you don't take action and nothing changes. So even if in the short term the change is scary and bumpy, it's important. You got to weather that turbulence. Because in the long term, it will catch up with you in a positive, abundant way. Staying stuck just keeps you stuck. So that's also what's exciting about it is you've completely won back your power and you've completely now have a wide open canvas to start again. Just starting again. Which we have to do every day, moment by moment, in many ways. Start again. Just start again. So that's really all I wanted to say. They were just some thoughts about, how to survive the things that go on in your head about your own self-worth vis-a-vis being an actor during this time of pilot season. You're more than a job, people. And you're more than the way you think the people who are giving you the job or hold the power to offer you the job, the way you think they think about you. You're more than that. So please remember that.